All right, I think I am on the air, so let's get started. So today I will be sharing on how to build websites with Jekyll. My name is Michael Lee, and first off, I just want to go ahead and give a big shout out to Anna and Corinne from PyLadies Remote for setting up this class and running such a awesome community at PyLadies Remote. And just giving me this opportunity to share about building websites with Jekyll. I also want to thank PyLadies Remote again for just having an awesome community and creating and providing opportunities and resources to the greater developer community. And I also want to thank you for those who are attending this class, either in the morning or afternoon or evening. It's a remote community, and so wherever you are and wherever you're watching this video class from, I just want to thank you for taking your day and spending it with me. Before we get started, I just want to point out that there is a live chat room. This video is also being recorded, so by the time you see this video, if the live event has passed, then you might not be able to utilize this resource. But if you are watching this video live, you can join in on the conversation. And if you have any questions, please go to this website, which is talk.io. Talk is spelled TLK.io. /PyLadies Remote. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them there, and I will do my best to pause and answer as many questions as possible. Also, please do not be shy about asking questions. Just because someone else might have the same question as you do, and it would help them out. So yeah, if you have any questions, no questions are, too silly. Just go ahead and ask them, and I will do my best to answer them during this talk. I'm also on Twitter, so you can find me at Michael Sue Lee. If after this class, or if you're watching this video not during the live cast, then and you have any questions about Jekyll, or if you want to just connect, you can find me there on Twitter. You could also check out my website, michaelsuelee.com. That's spelled MICHAELSOOLEE.com. And at this website, I write about dev stuff, design stuff, and some articles about Jekyll as well. So as I said, my name is Michael Lee. I am a developer and designer based out of Cary, North Carolina, in the United States. I've been in, I guess, the technology industry for about 8 or 9 years, working for various companies as a developer and designer. I've also done some freelancing in my career as well. And today I will be going over what Jekyll is and basically how beneficial it is to use it to build websites. So let me go ahead and first answer this question: is what is Jekyll? So Jekyll is a static site generator written in Ruby, the Ruby programming language. So translation, what it means is it takes plain files such as Markdown, HTML, and CSS, and allows you to create some really awesome websites. So the next question that you might have is, what is a static website? So let me give you an example. This right here, for those who are familiar, it's Twitter. More specifically, it's my Twitter profile. And, Twitter is a dynamic website. And what characterizes a dynamic website is that it's usually hooked up to a database. It's probably got some server-side code running somewhere, usually written in like Ruby or Python, PHP, or Go. And unfortunately, these things are susceptible to things like security issues because it's running on a database. There are attacks on databases and vulnerabilities that databases have. There could be breakages due to software updates as well. There might be some kind of issues within the underlying programming language, or if it's running, like, so for example, if it's something like WordPress or Drupal, it might be susceptible to software vulnerabilities because the user or the maintainer of the website hasn't patched up or updated the software in a long time. If you've been around Twitter for a while, some of you guys might remember this thing, which is famously called the Twitter fail whale, I believe. Yeah, I mean, this is another example of some of the limitations of dynamic websites, and that I believe when Twitter was, it's too many users were trying to use Twitter at one time, their servers or their service would get overloaded, and so it would basically become crippled, and nobody would be able to use it. And so, yeah, Twitter would put up this page to indicate that there is something wrong with their service, and that you have to come back later and try again. So, what is a static site? This is kind of the opposite of what a dynamic website is. The example that you're looking at right now is Smashing Magazine, which is a very popular design and development website. And I think at the middle of last year, they went through a transition. They transitioned off of WordPress and rebuilt their website on a static site generator, one written in Go, not exactly Jekyll. They use something called Hugo. And some of the benefits that they are able to, quickly, take advantage of is that a static website doesn't have a database. So like I said, it's not susceptible to those database attacks or kind of security vulnerabilities. It uses files, just plain files, to serve their site, and it doesn't have any server-side code. So real quick, let me go into some of the benefits, or what makes a static site awesome. First of all, your data is safe with you and easily transportable. I mean, what that means is, since all your blog posts or all your content is just written in plain text files, such as like Markdown, you can literally toss your data or your blog post on, say, Dropbox, or if you have a external hard drive that you use for your backup, you can put it on there, or you could even put it up on Amazon S3 and save it up there. Literally, you can stick your data anywhere because it's not relying on any one particular database. Another great benefit for having your data transportable is that you can move easily from one static generator to another one fairly easily. So, I'm talking about Jekyll today, but there are so many other static generators out there that, maybe after today, you go check out Jekyll and you're not fully satisfied with what Jekyll will do. You can go and check out, something like Hugo, which is written in Go, or I believe there's like Gatsby, which is written in JavaScript and Node, and you can do some crazy things like with React. The next benefit is you don't have to worry about setting up some fancy server to run your website. So, you can, you know, more than freely go to something like DigitalOcean and set up your own, VPS server, virtual private server, and get Ubuntu running and set up all the server, technology to get it serving and whatnot. But you don't have to if you don't want to. So you can save literally all that time and energy and kind of the pains of setting all these things up. You don't have to do that at all. Hosting is fairly cheap, or in some instances, it's completely free. There are options out there such as Netlify. That's what I use for hosting um, my personal website. There's also GitHub Pages, which is run by GitHub, and it's really cool. You can basically take your blog, and if it's saved on or versioned on GitHub using Git, you could easily turn that repo into an actual website using GitHub Pages, and it's completely free, provided by GitHub, and it's super fast and secure, because you're not relying on some server or backend code to generate and render and serve up your website. It's just plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so, in the example of Smashing Magazine, they have an article where they talked about some of the benefits that they saw from moving over to a static site generated website, and they were saying that their website it went from first load at I think 800 milliseconds down to 80 milliseconds. So that's a 10x improvement on just site speed in general. So it's blazing fast. You can also take advantage of things like content delivery networks, meaning you put it up on this server or this service, and they will quickly put your website content kind of on multiple servers. And so depending on where your audience is for your website, they will serve up your content or your website from the closest server. And so it has that capability and that advantage there. So real quick before I move on, I want to pause and give folks a chance to ask questions. So if you have any questions, I'm looking over at the talk.io/PyLadies remote site. So again, please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them there. If not, after a short pause, I'll keep going. Cool. I just peeked in on the live chat, and so it doesn't look like anybody has any questions. So again, I will I'm going to continue. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them there. Oh, wow. Yeah, there looks like there's folks in there, chatting it up. So no questions yet, but again, thank you for joining me this morning, or evening or afternoon or wherever you guys are, for this class. So let me just continue, since I don't see any questions yet. So I wanted to share why I chose Jekyll and stuck with Jekyll. So prior to discovering Jekyll, I was using WordPress to build all my websites. And this was actually, like, I think 6 or 7 years ago, when I started doing that, or when I was, kind of knee deep into WordPress development. WordPress, really just kind of took over that ability for people to set up websites quickly and set up blogs quickly. And so it's a great technology. But there was some things that I just wasn't happy about with WordPress. I quickly found out that with WordPress, I was doing things that I didn't enjoy, which took me away from doing the things that I did enjoy most about, being a web developer, which is designing websites and developing websites. Instead of designing and developing websites, I was always caught up with making sure WordPress had the latest updates, or making sure that, I could find the right plugins and kind of tweak them to do what I wanted WordPress to do. And sometimes, I would end up with a lot of spaghetti code, and what would happen was I would publish my website and cross my fingers and hope that everything will keep running for a very long time. And so, yeah, running and building websites with WordPress was just really stressful for me. I was also doing, freelance work, and so, my go-to solution for building websites for clients was WordPress. And because of that, if you're a freelancer, you're not always dealing with the client. Once you have a product or project handoff, that might be kind of the last time you talk to them, or, you might not talk to the client again for X amount of months. And so you always have, or I always had, that kind of fear in the back of my mind of, what if their WordPress site, got hacked, or, they didn't keep it updated, or should I have some kind of maintenance agreement where I go back and kind of update their website, which, yeah, would, to be honest, cause a lot of stress for me as a freelance designer. So once I found Jekyll, all those problems that I had kind of went away. Some of the concerns, such as, will these servers keep running, and will the software keep running, after X amount of months or years or whatnot. But with Jekyll, because there's no back-end code or back-end software to worry about, or databases, I got to focus on what was most important to my users. Again, let me emphasize, the users of my website, which is content. Cool. So before I go on to the next section, I do see there are some questions on the online chat. So let me look over those and see if I can answer them. Let's see. Okay, so cool. So there's a question here from Purple Diane 88, and her question, or their question is, I have a GitHub website I made with Jekyll following GitHub directions. I'm here because I don't really understand how it works. My question is how to give it an RSS feed for for Planet Python is how to give it an RSS feed for Planet Python. So I'm not familiar with what Planet Python is, but I will quickly, answer that question regarding RSS feed. So with generating an RSS feed, basically it's just another file that you would create, so that whenever Jekyll is built, it kind of goes through this run loop and generates, the code or the output that it needs to have an RSS feed. I don't know how Planet Python does it, or if your question is how do I add it onto maybe your project called Planet Python. But if you look at, there's a project called Minima, which I believe is the kind of the official theme that Jekyll is packaged with. If you go to github.com and type in Minima, you should be able to find it fairly quickly or easily. And there should be a RSS file that they have defined that kind of takes care of that. Let's see. Oh, someone else in there. So the next person, there's a plugin Jekyll RSS, if I'm not mistaken, you can use. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so thank you for that suggestion. Maybe there is a Jekyll RSS plugin. I just haven't checked it out. I'll definitely check it out or look into it and see if there's anything that if Jekyll RSS would do what it needs it to do. Let's see. Next, just temporal. Yes, GitHub Pages is really cool. Mine is also on Jekyll. Awesome. Okay, yeah. So yeah, what I would do is probably check out Minima, and I believe there is a file in there that shows you, or at least gives you a starting point on how to generate an RSS feed. After this class, there is actually a web page that I have set up on my personal website, and I will gladly add some more information on RSS, how to set that up with a Jekyll project. So I'll cover it there in more detail. All right, so let me, or actually, is there any other questions? I want to pause and make sure that I answer as many questions as possible. So let me pause again for a minute, and if there's any other questions, feel free to ask. Cool. So let me keep going. So one of the biggest questions that I get from folks who are trying to get into Jekyll development or using Jekyll to build websites is, do I need to know Ruby to use Jekyll? Aside from setting up Jekyll, you really don't need to know how to, you don't need to know the Ruby programming language to make websites with Jekyll. Although Jekyll is written in the Ruby programming language, for as long as I've used it, I can assure you that you don't need to know Ruby at all. So, for those who might come from a different background, maybe you're a Python developer, rest easy. Jekyll is a great option for static site generation, and you don't need to know how to, program with Ruby to get started. All you really need to know to start, building websites with Jekyll is HTML, CSS, and if you want, JavaScript. But really, that's not a requirement at all. But if you do know some JavaScript, you can do some really cool stuff, such as hooking into API services and whatnot, and third-party services to get some more kind of dynamic functionalities within your project. There's also one other key piece that I think would be helpful if you are trying to build websites with Jekyll, which is a technology called Liquid. And so your question might be, hey, so what the heck is Liquid? Liquid is a templating language that was created over by Shopify. So if you've done any type of shopping online, the site that or the e-commerce website that it's running on is probably Shopify, because Shopify is really popular nowadays. And Shopify has created the technology for people that don't want to deal with all these complex software to get an e-commerce website up and running, and created a solution where people can get up and running fairly quickly. So a templating language like Liquid allows you to lay out your website and have a little more control over the flow of your data. So data like your blog posts and whatnot, and how those are kind of laid out and generated when you're using Jekyll to generate your website. Liquid provides you controls like partials. So say, for example, you have like a footer or a header or a call to action that you want to show up on, all the different pages. And, if you're just using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make your website, you probably understand how cumbersome and labor intense it could be to generate the same thing over and over again. You probably have to copy and paste and make sure all the code is up to date. But with something like Liquid, it allows you to separate these repeatable components or UI elements, such as the footer and header, put it in one file. And so if you want to make changes to it, you can change it once and have it show up everywhere. It also provides things like logic, such as if-else statements. You can have things like tags and say, if this post is tagged with this, then show this piece of data. So for example, with my website, all my posts about Jekyll, I have this specific block that is a CTA or a call to action that lets people know that I'm writing a book on Jekyll. You can also do things like loops, such as like for loops. And so if you're going through a data set, you can say, you can do all these crazy things with loops. And the cool thing is, if you're familiar with building shops on Shopify, you're probably already familiar with Liquid. But not to discourage you, on the flip side, if you've never built anything with Shopify, learning to build websites with Jekyll and Liquid will give you added benefits, such as being able to take that knowledge and later on build shops on Shopify. So it really is to your advantage to learn Liquid, because if you're a developer or a freelancer, you can get more business, because a lot of people out there who are trying to start businesses are looking for Shopify theme developers and shop developers. So what does Jekyll do? Or what I like to ask is, what sort of superpowers does Jekyll give? First of all, Jekyll gives you the ability to create static sites with dynamic-like features. So like I said, with Liquid, you can do things like, if-else statements, depending on, you can have tags, you can do RSS, you can do really a lot of complex things with your website and with Jekyll. To kind of solidify, all the things that I'm sharing with you, I think it will be easier to show you some examples. So I'm going to go into, some of the things that I've built with Jekyll, and hopefully it'll give you some ideas about what Jekyll can do for you, as a developer or a designer. But before I do that, again, I want to quickly pause and, switch over to the live chat room to see if there's any questions so far, or since my last pause. And again, if you have any questions about why Jekyll is awesome, or let's see, maybe more details as to what Liquid is or what Shopify is, feel free to ask questions regarding that stuff. All right. So first, oh, okay. Let's see. There's a question from Jess Temporal. What's the difference between Liquid and Jinja? So to be honest, I have never heard of Jinja. Is that a templating system as well, or a templating language? Cool. Yeah. So it seems like it's a templating language. Because I'm not familiar with it, I can't really answer to that. But I'm more than happy to look into Jinja after my talk, after this class, and hopefully I can extract some information there and put it up on my website, and provide some insight into that. Cool. Yeah. So it seems like it's used by Django, which is a framework, I believe, in Python. So if y'all have more experience there, feel free to share, because again, I'm not familiar with the world of Python. I'm interested, but I personally am not that invested in Python at this moment. But yeah, I would totally look into what Jinja is and try to see what the differences are between Liquid and Jinja. Cool. So any other questions before I move on? Okay, cool. Yeah. So let me keep going. So the first example that I wanted to share was my personal website. Again, you can find it at michaelsulee.com. And I write things about Jekyll and web development and design and whatnot. So if you want to follow along there, you can. So at quick glance, you might think, oh, you could probably just make this with plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But there are things here that, it might be very subtle, but things that a static site generator like Jekyll can really make easy. So underneath the title, Onboarding at Airbnb Design Team, there's a little section that says, written by Michael Lee on January 4th, 2018. So let's say, for example, you come from the WordPress camp, and you're familiar with multiple kind of authors, all writing in from their CMS, and publishing this website or their website. when they generate and push out an article, most likely, depending on their login, the article will be attributed to the author. So with HTML and just plain CSS and whatnot, again, you would have to do a lot of copy and pasting, and it's there's a lot of room for error because you would be duplicating files. With Jekyll, like I mentioned, you can use something like a partial. Define you could define what that author kind of block looks like or file looks like, and then you can add something called front matter, which is just YAML that goes on the top of every blog post or page built with Jekyll. And using that front matter, it can change dynamically, this written by section, and also, because it also has some front matter on when the documentation was, or when the document was created, it will update automatically this publish date. This is another part of a page or an article on my website. It's more towards the bottom of my different articles. And as you can see, there are some things that is, pretty familiar with, I guess, on more dynamic websites. Like, for example, this previous post and next posting. Within Jekyll, it already has kind of, a sense of what article came before and what article comes next. And so using Liquid, I created, some code that basically, can say, okay, when you're rendering this page, put into this page, a link to what the previous post was. So, the post that I either wrote yesterday or the day before when this post, or, the most previous post that came before this, and the post that came next to it, so that it creates, kind of a dynamic sort of look and feel. Also, this footer, or I guess this little area, I've put in a little thing that says, hey, this is who I am. And I really appreciate your time and checking out my website. So this next example is, I write articles on Jekyll, and as I mentioned before, I create, or I'm currently writing a book on how to make websites with Jekyll. And so all the articles that I write on my website that has to do with Jekyll, I've got some data, like I said, in YAML that tells Jekyll that, whenever you see this page, I want you to put this special partial, or this layout component, UI component, into this page. And so I've got this thing where it says, did you enjoy this article? Well, hey, I'm currently writing a book on making a website with Jekyll. And so from there, it has a, tell me more, where people can click there, and it'll take them to a landing page for my book where they can sign up to get updates, and also, just find out more information about the book. And so if you're, a developer or a designer who is more, kind of marketing focused, or creating websites that has marketing content, you can easily swap out these call to actions, based on, whatever the page is or the article is, and, make it so that the page is robust, and providing content that's relevant for the topic of this content. Another website that I've built using Jekyll is a project called Spellitout. And what Spellitout is just a personal project where, being in the tech industry, I've realized I come across a lot of acronyms and shortenings. And, especially when you start a new job somewhere, people might be using acronyms as if you know what it means. And, I don't know about you, but I've been in many situations where someone will use an acronym and I'm just like, oh gosh, like thinking in my head, I feel really dumb or stupid because they're using it as if I should know what the acronym means, but I have no idea. And so it's usually like, after I hear the acronym, I'll go to my computer, or go back to my seat and ask a colleague, hey, what does, something like API mean? Or, someone used something like a KPI. What does that mean? Key performance indicator and whatnot. So I came up with this idea to create a website where it literally spells out all these acronyms that I've thought of or came across as a web developer or designer. And as you can see, or as I said, it's actually built in Jekyll. Some of the, I guess, special things that I've baked into Spellitout versus my personal website is at the top, you will see that there is a search bar. And so because Jekyll is a static site generator, there's no server-side code to kind of run these processes of checking a database or something like that. It's just plain files. There are services out there, and I think there's a lot of services now where they create these kind of one-off services or specialized services where you can sign up and provide them data from your website, and they will generate an API, which then you can use JavaScript to add in some of these, kind of dynamic interactions into your website. So I believe the service that I'm using here is Algolia, and they're a service as a, or excuse me, software as a service company that provides quick search from your website. And so using Jekyll, I create a JSON file, and I use that to upload to Algolia, which lets them index, what sort of information that's on my website. And then I use some JavaScript on my Jekyll website that will, do an API call and go over that data that they've saved on their website, and then it quickly, provides this really neat search function. So yeah, so here's an example of that search function. I've typed in CD, and it shows me that Algolia has indexed CD and CDN. So yeah, if you're interested, you can find this website at spellitout.xyz. It's just all no spaces, so spellitout.xyz. And this screenshot here, again, it shows you some of, I'm using my imagination here because once I, created this website and shared it kind of on these different communities, one of them being dev.to, which is a really awesome programming and developer community. I highly recommend you guys checking it out. And, I shared it also on Twitter. Folks started submitting, acronyms that they have run into in their careers or, in their circles of communities or whatnot. So this one right here is FP for functional programming, which was submitted by a friend of mine on Twitter. And so, yeah, I like to give credit where credit is due. And so I have this little section underneath where it says special thanks to Smelly Dog Coding, or at Smelly Dog Coding, which is my friend's handle on Twitter. And it says, for submitting FP and spelling it out. And so, if this was just a plain, HTML, CSS website, it's a lot of work to get this working. But using some liquid logic, I can say, okay, this is the Twitter handle that I want to give credit to. And since, I already have information in there on what FP and functioning programming is, give them thanks for that, that acronym. Cool. So another example here is TinyWins. You can find this website at tinywins.net. And TinyWins is just a simple to-do app that I've created um, uh, using JavaScript and Node. So, as you can tell, the application side of it is dynamic, but what I wanted to do is create the marketing site and separate that from the application side. And so the way that I did that was I basically have two subdomains set up. So on tinywins.net, you could go there, and it's actually serving up this Jekyll built website, which serves as my marketing site. And so that lives over on Amazon Web Services using their S3 and CloudFront CDN technology. And so, if, for example, someone tweets about it and my to-do application goes viral, people can go to this website, and because it's on a CDN, it can be viewed. I can get a huge traffic surge, and there wouldn't be any issues as far as the website coming down, or I wouldn't have to deal with something like the Twitter fail whale or anything like that. And so it's really cool that you can do this. I'm showing this example because you might be in say, for example, a company who might have maybe a software offering, but then also has a marketing side, and maybe their website is running off of their marketing website might be running off of WordPress. And after this talk, you might say, hey, there's a lot of benefits of running our website on Jekyll or some other static site generator. And so, yeah, this is an example of what you could probably do with like a marketing website, or say, for example, if you have a side project and you want to quickly set up a landing page, you could use something like Jekyll to do that. And as you can see from this previous slide to this next slide, the layout has changed a little. And so what you're seeing right now is the blog side of tinywins.net. And, I wanted to take the focus off of the TinyWins logo. And so I've moved that over to the left, made the title kind of front and center. And then on the top right-hand side, you can see that, I have a little navigation that has, things like pricing, blog, or, if it's a user that's been using TinyWins for a while, it has a little sign-in button as well. And as I mentioned, it's really easy to set up, these dynamic or quote unquote dynamic blocks, such as an author block. And so as you can see underneath the title, it says written by Michael Lee. Although TinyWins is only running, it's built and running by me only, sometime in the future, if it takes off, or if I want to collaborate with someone and have them also write blogs and stuff too, I can easily set that up where that, whenever they publish something to the TinyWins marketing website, it would have their picture and their, Twitter handle and whatnot. All right, so let's see. I think there's another question over on the chat. So let me see. Is it open source? I don't know when this question came in, so I'm going to assume, it might have came in at the top end of all my examples. So michaelsulee.com, my personal website, is open sourced. You can find all the source code over at GitHub. I believe my GitHub handle is just Michael Lee. And I've got a bunch of projects up there that, a lot of projects are open source on there. Spellitout, unfortunately, right now is not open source, although it is running off of Jekyll. it's a fairly new project, and so I have had thoughts about maybe taking portions of it and open sourcing it at some time. But as of right now, it is not open source. It's not on GitHub or anything like that. Tiny Wins, I I don't think the Tiny Wins marketing website is open source, and the project itself also is not open source. Yeah. So I hope that answered your question. Is there any other questions that you might have regarding some of the examples that I shared with you? Either with my personal website, Spellitout, or Tiny Wins. Maybe I can talk about anything specific like my setup. I've also shared the hosting is a lot different. So my personal website, it's hosted on netlify.com, which is really awesome. If you're trying to figure out where to host your static site after this talk, and you've never heard of Netlify, I highly recommend it. They have some really cool features there that I haven't been able to find in different services, all kind of wrapped into one. One of them being is if your site is hosted on Bitbucket or GitHub, every time you send a push to your Git repo on GitHub or Bitbucket, Netlify will automatically see that push update, and they will build your Jekyll website for you. And then whenever it's fully built, they'll send it out to their CDN, their content delivery network servers. And so, generating your site is really simple. Excuse me. I also have spellitout.xyz on there as well. And if you can see in the top right-hand corner, there's a submit button. And that takes you to a really simple form. And basically that form, when I had put it into my Jekyll website, it's just plain HTML. It doesn't, I don't have any JavaScript hooked up to it or, some server-side code. It literally is just a HTML marked up form. But they have this special tag. Netlify has this special tag in there. I can't remember what that tag is off the top of my head, or attribute for the form tag. And through some magic or voodoo, it will capture form submissions, and they also handle things like redirecting the person or the user to a thank you page once they submitted the form. So this is really neat in that I can take form submissions and make this website really, kind of crowdsourced in that, I'm tapping into the larger community saying that, hey, I think launching this website almost 2 weeks ago now, I had, I think, 70 or so words right off the bat. But after I submitted it, or after I launched it and shared it to the different communities that I was in, within a week, I think I had like 40 to 50 new acronyms. And so this was really neat for me, because I was able to take my idea, which I think I had like maybe a week and a half before launching, quickly lay out things and put things together. Using Jekyll, and then using a service like Netlify to not only host my site, but add in some of these cool little functions that provides more dynamic functionalities to my website. And then Tiny Wins, like I said, it's hosted on AWS. It's Amazon Web Services. Specifically S3, which is, I think, simple something storage. I can't remember what the other S stands for in S3. And yeah, that's where my marketing website is. But and it's actually a paid service. I think every month I pay like pennies to host this website, and it's super fast as well. But if you are familiar with AWS, it's a little bit of a learning curve to get everything set up. Cool. So, before I get into how, do I get started with Jekyll, I will also say, in the past, I've also created something like a marketing website for a restaurant. A friend of mine is creating a really cool concept where they're basically making these huge sushi kind of burrito sort of things that you can pick up like a burrito and eat, and it's basically like a huge sushi roll that you can eat like a burrito. And so he came to me talking about, hey, I want to have a marketing website, and so I've created a website for them where it has pictures and it serves the marketing side of things like tiny wins. My wife also has a Etsy shop where she creates paper goods, such as banners and cards and stuff like that. And at one point, before moving her business onto Etsy, I did have a e-commerce website set up for her using Jekyll and using a service called Gumroad. Gumroad is spelled Gumroad, which allows you to, create these, product pages and allows you to add these buy buttons for products that you might be selling from your website. And so I was able to take these product buttons that I had created with Gumroad and create a, kind of faux e-commerce website using Jekyll. And so, as you can see, and I hope this really paints the picture that, the only limitation that Jekyll has is really your imagination. You can really do a lot of cool things with Jekyll, and really, probably any static site generator. All you really need is your imagination and probably Google and Stack Overflow, and you can do some really neat stuff with it. Cool. So now that I've shared about Jekyll, you might be wondering, hey, like Michael, I hear you. Jekyll seems awesome. I've seen you create some awesome projects and stuff like that. It sounds like from the chat room, there are some people who have tried Jekyll, but maybe something just didn't make sense, or it was just hard. I've put together a webpage on my website that I've listed some Jekyll resources, and by doing this, I really hope that it will help y'all's journey, you guys, or everyone's journey on discovering Jekyll and building websites with Jekyll and whatnot. You can find that at michaelsuley.com/PyLadies-Jekyll. And I've included a link to my slides that I've used today. I've added, I think, some links to all the Jekyll articles that I've written on my website. There's going to be some notes. I know there was a lot of questions on the live chat today, so I'm going to go over it again and try to answer them to the best of my ability. One of them being, what's the difference between Jinja and Liquid? And so I'll post that up there. Wow, awesome. Someone in the chat room, Transition, has already posted that my resource on there. So thank you, Transition, for making that happen. Yeah, so feel free to check out that resource, and I really hope that it helps you out. If there's something that's missing, or even going through that website or that page, and there's something that's still missing, or there's some questions that you have, feel free to tweet me. Like I said, I'm at Michael Suley. That's spelled MichaelSoolee. I hang out on Twitter quite often, and so if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a question there, and I will try to get to you as soon as I can. If I don't know the answer, I will try to search for someone who might know the answer, or do some research and answer your questions for you. So that's all I have for my class today. Again, let me pause again and see if there's any questions, last minute questions in the live chat room that I can maybe answer before we wrap up this class. So let me pause for a couple minutes and see if I can answer any more questions that you all might have. Let me, there are some, I guess, questions that I've run into and being in the Jekyll community for so long now that, I'll go ahead and just toss out there. Hopefully it will help you, or if you run into this question in your journey with Jekyll, hopefully it'll help you. One of them is GitHub Pages. I think there is a limitation on using Jekyll plugins. Plugins are a great way to kind of extend the abilities of Jekyll. And so I think right off the bat, github.com does not allow you to, or has some limitations regarding using plugins in their system and with GitHub Pages. And so, my solution for that is look at other services such as Netlify, or you can build your project itself or yourself on your machine, and then take the generated site, which usually ends up being in a folder called _site in your Jekyll project folder, and you can put your project somewhere else for hosting, and it should have all the plugin kind of niceties baked into your website. Another one I think is forestry.io. I'm going to go ahead, forestry.io. Let me just make sure this is it. Yeah, forestry.io, which is another hosting solution. The cool thing about forestry.io is it kind of answers another question that I've often come across when considering static site generators like Jekyll is, well, hey, Jekyll is great for hosting, but I'm setting up a website where I have non-technical people who are my colleagues, and they need to generate content for the website. So in the example with a blog, you might be the tech lead or the tech person who is managing the blog or the website, which is built on Jekyll or some static site generator for your company. And, you can't give them, non-technical colleagues access to the Git repo. It would probably be really annoying and takes away, time from your work for everybody to, email it to you. And every time there's a change in content, people are going to bother you. And so, you might be saying, well, there's no content management system like WordPress for Jekyll. And, I mentioned that there's a lot of cool services out there that have spun up because of the popularity of Jekyll and other static site generators that are answering sort of some of these pain points. And one of them is forestry.io. And what it allows you to do is put your project on forestry.io. They'll host it for you, and you can set up logins for different people on your team where they can log in, and all they will see is is just a really nice interface for them to create blog posts, upload pictures, make changes to whatever website that is built on your static site, and they take care of all the versioning and making sure all your data ends up back into your Git repository or wherever you're doing your source control. So I highly recommend checking out forestry.io if content management systems is something of a desired piece when using something like Jekyll or other static site generators. Let me think. Is there another, I guess, stumbling block for those who are getting into the Jekyll ecosystem? Not too long ago, or I think it's been about a year or so now, Jekyll went from a project-based theming system to a Ruby gem-based theming system. Let me try to explain that a little, because it might be a little confusing if you're not familiar with how Jekyll projects are themed. So when you have Jekyll and you use it to generate a project, so Jekyll is basically a command line tool. It'll create a project with files and folders on your machine, and by default it will use minima, I think, if you don't change anything, and minima is packaged as a Ruby gem, and so a gem is just basically a package that Ruby uses in their ecosystem to add, sort of extensions and packages that other people have created. And so they went from, a project-based system where all your kind of theming layouts and Sass files and JavaScript information lives on the file system, to this package that is, retrieved from the internet and whatnot. I have found that it's not useful. So there are two scenarios for and against this gem-based theming system. If you are creating a theme for Jekyll that you plan on open sourcing and providing to the wide audience of Jekyll, community of Jekyll, I would highly recommend using a gem-based system. This is because you can make changes to your code and push it out upstream into your GitHub repo or wherever you are hosting it, and the package manager itself will be able to bring up updates to the Jekyll template. So whoever's using your template can easily grab these updates, and you don't have to notify them or anything like that. They don't have to download anything. They can just do like a bundle update, and it'll update their theme inside their project for you, or for them, excuse me. The flip side is you can still generate a Jekyll project using their what I call the project based system, where all your theming files live on or live in the Jekyll project that Jekyll has generated. And this is my preference on theming and creating websites with Jekyll. The reason being, so for example, Spellitout has a very custom look and feel and code and whatnot and style sheets. And it's something that at this moment I don't want to share with the rest of the world, or Tiny Wins. At some point I could probably package it up and make it open source, but as of right now, because I haven't made it open source, it's very specific to the projects that I've created. And so if you're working in a company that maybe is has a very specific template that is proprietary to, or design is proprietary to your company, instead of going with a public gem-based system, you can just use your project-based templating system, and keep it within the repo and isolated, and the source code wouldn't live anywhere else. It would only live in the repo that the project is committed to. I think at the top of my head, that's all the kind of common questions that I've run into with building websites with Jekyll. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this up. I don't think there's any other new questions that I've seen within the chat room. So yeah, again, I just want to thank you for joining me this day, Saturday, or I think some parts around the world it might be Sunday for you. Thank you for joining me in this class, and I really hope you have a great day and have a lot of fun diving into Jekyll. Thanks.